Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Knockout Podcast, episode 52. The sun is shining. It's the beginning of spring, and what better thing to do than not go outside, but stay inside and talk about fights? It really brings me back to sort of last summer when we would be sitting in our rooms in the sweltering summer talking about fights. But
yeah,
good to be back doing it again.
No, it's a lot nicer than it was then. There's a nice breeze coming in from my window, so it's quite a nice setting to just chill and talk about. Although we don't have too much to talk about today, but there are a few good fights and a few interesting developments to just briefly touch on.
Yeah, we've not got any fights coming up this weekend, so we're just going to be giving a quick recap and some quick thoughts on some of the main things coming out of 260. But yeah, as Jack alluded to there, a few bits of news coming out of the UFC in the last sort of 24 hours, both concerning British fighters. The first one was Darren Till against Marvin Vettori, or what was Darren Till versus Marvin Vettori, which is no more. I think Darren Till broke his collarbone in training.
Yeah, it was that. Yeah.
Which is a shame. And I think
bad injury as well.
Yeah, looks like he's
nice one.
Going to be replaced by Kevin Holland. Someone was saying, Derek Brunson is sort of the gatekeeper to the elite of the middleweight division. Kevin Holland's got handedly beaten by the gatekeeper, but has still found his way through the door.
Yeah, somehow, some way.
He's rocked up to the club entry completely drunk. He's got passed away by the bouncer, and yet he somehow still made it into the club.
Yeah, someone showing him like a back door that the managers then just welcomed him in somehow. I don't understand it. But if Kevin Holland gets this fight and somehow he manages to win, which to be honest, I think a Vettori fight is probably slightly more favourable than the Brunson fight would be. So if he does manage to win that somehow, which I don't think he will, it would be quite the development, to be honest. I don't quite know where the division goes from there if he does win.
Yeah, I think it probably is an easier fight. Although I mentioned that, but Vettori has certainly got a lot of strength on the ground. Anyway, I think he used that it was his second last fight against Carl Roberson. So I'm sure he will know as well as anyone does know that if he can get the fight to the ground against Holland, that's where his strengths lie. I think it's yeah. I'd be surprised if Holland wins, but it certainly is a bizarre development. But at least if it can keep that main event on, then that's a good thing, because other than that main fight with Vettori and the co-main in Allen versus Sadiq Youssef, the card is pretty
empty.
empty. So,
although Nina Ansaroff, Mackenzie Dern is decent.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah,
but not a whole lot on there. So that's at least a slight positive if Holland can get that fight. The other news, which came out of complete left field this morning.
Yeah, I really was very surprised by this. I was like,
out of all the options I'd have ever considered for Leon Edwards, the first non-title 5-round co-main event at UFC 262 versus Nate Diaz is not what I'd have had written down in my sort of my number 1 to 10 things that I would have guessed happening, but here we are. And I mean, we always talk about the bad luck that Edwards has had. Another guy, Vicente Luque, as we'll get onto, got that win over Woodley that Edwards didn't get. But now this fight, 5 rounds on a pay-per-view against probably one of the biggest casual names in the welterweight division, maybe bar Masvidal, Nate Diaz. I mean, this is a winnable fight, and B against I think
very winnable fight.
I think it's a very winnable fight.
I wasn't going because it's not a winnable fight. It's like he should be heavily favoured against Nate Diaz.
I was going to say for a second, I was like,
this isn't a winnable fight for Leon Edwards. No, no, it's a very, very winnable fight. He should be a huge favourite, to be honest.
No, and hopefully gives him that name that we've all been saying. He's not got the big following. I'm not sure not a lot of people sort of casually know him in sort of well, no, certainly compared to a lot of the other welterweight fighters. So this is a great opportunity for him if it can all stay in place for 262 in a couple of months. Then this is as you said, I think this is such a winnable fight for him. And yeah, I think this is just the luck he deserves after a rotten year.
Yeah, no, I think it really did kind of like take me by surprise. I, to be honest, never thought we'd see Nate Diaz fight again. I was not expecting Nate Diaz to come back. So yeah, and the 5-round co-main event thing, non-title, it's weird, but I do quite like it. I hope they do that for more things. Like, there have been so many fights that have been co-mains that I'm like, oh, I wish they could make this 5 rounds. That'd be great. Like, I don't know, Tony Ferguson, Cowboy Cerrone kind of came to mind, or although that didn't make it 3 rounds. But there have been just so many fights where I thought, oh, this would be a nice one for 5 rounds. But they haven't done it. So yeah, I hope they can do this every now and again for like a kind of special fight that everyone agrees on. So yeah, that'd be cool. But yeah, I was looking at actually earlier today after I saw the fight announcement, I went on like Tapology, where it shows like all the cancelled fights, which is a good thing. It's a nice thing that Tapology do that. And Leon Edwards has had such a bad run of luck. Like, he was scheduled to fight Tyron Woodley before the Burns and Covington losses. So it was like when a win over Woodley really would have still meant a lot, to be honest. Like, he had only lost to Usman like prior to that.
Yeah.
So the winner beating Woodley there, which I think he definitely would have, certainly in hindsight, would have been massive for Edwards. So having that cancelled, like, due to coronavirus, completely out of his hands, is so unfortunate. And then he gets COVID, then his opponent gets COVID, and then his opponent gets COVID, and then his opponent is like thinking about retiring when it gets rescheduled again because of how bad his COVID effects are. Like, it was 4 cancelled fights in a row, and then like a freak accident when he finally did make it to the cage. It's one of the worst runs of luck I think that I know of in MMA, to be honest. So yeah, getting what should be a bit of a layup against a really big name is, I think, something that is really well deserved for Leon Edwards.
Yeah, it's certainly a cracking stroke of luck for him. For Diaz, I think the only, as I've been mulling it over whilst you were talking, I think the only thing he sees is this is a big game. I mean, I'm sure he probably knows deep down this is a tough fight. If he wins this, he probably thinks he can get himself a title shot. Yeah. Probably off the win against Edwards and his name value. So this is perhaps, short-circuiting his potential route to a final title shot. Well, actually, just title shot in general, but, a last hurrah in his career. But, other than that, he doesn't really get a whole lot out of this because, he's always said he's coming back to fight sort of big names, but this is certainly an exception. But I think he probably recognises if he can pull off a very unlikely win here, then he can set himself up maybe to make a case for the Usman fight after Masvidal, but we'll see.
Yeah. Hopefully, although I don't know, maybe he thinks Masvidal could win, I suppose, and he wants to get the Masvidal fight back or something. But like an Usman fight just sounds so miserable for Nate Diaz. I have no idea why he'd want that. Like, that sounds like just the worst day of his life. Like, just he'd be so bored. He'd be just getting so frustrated and then beat up at the same time. I had no idea why he'd want that fight, other than obviously it's a title shot, but. Still, or maybe if he thinks with a win he can maybe get the McGregor 3rd fight or something like that. It might be difficult to kind of sell that with Nate coming off a loss to Masvidal. So yeah, I think probably a few things like that. I don't know what he wants to do. He's a bit of an enigma, so it's interesting.
But yeah, no, we'll obviously talk a bit more about that near the time, but I can't see my sort of initial thoughts changing a whole lot. No. I think this is a cracking opportunity for Edwards in sort of both senses. But we will return to 260 to talk about, well, some of the main takeaways from that. I mean, earlier on the card, Abubakar Nurmagomedov got a good win. Michael versus Bukauskas. I think it's Alexichuk. I think that's how they said it on the broadcast. Oh. That was a good fight, and I think Bukauskas was a bit unlucky. Jamie Malarkey got a good 46-second win against Camel Worthy. Miranda Maverick with a good win against Gillian Robertson. But we'll start really with the big talking point, which was the main event: Francis Ngannou, Stipe Miocic, second round knockout. Francis Ngannou's new champ. I mean, my overriding emotion after this was just, my God, who on earth's going to stop Francis now? Because Stipe just looked like a deer in headlights out there.
Yeah. So I think when we were previewing this fight, things we talked about is that we hadn't seen developments from Francis, but it might not matter because Stipe looked old recently. And Stipe, I think, did look old, but not too bad, to be honest. He still looked fairly durable. He took some very heavy shots before going down. He took that big right hand in like the first minute, 30 seconds, something. And he ate it fairly cleanly. He did look a bit slower, I thought. Reactions weren't quite there. But then we said that, Ngannou, we hadn't seen developments from him. And I think that was fair of us to say because we hadn't. But the kind of reality was that he has developed massively.
Yeah, and I think there was no denying that he could have made improvements. And I think we're clear on that. It's just in the 1 minute or 2 minutes we'd seen of him since the Derek Lewis fight, he's not been able to show that. And anyway, I interrupted you, but
but I think he looks massively improved. Mechanics wise, I think occasionally he's still a bit overzealous, which occasionally leads to sloppiness. But ideas wise, he was so much improved. He was jabbing to initiate exchanges, double jabbing even. Like the first right hand that he cracked Stipe with, he triple jabbed. He double jabbed to the head, jabbed to the body, and then that set up the right hand upstairs. And it was like a clean, straight right hand, not a winging overhand. That was very nice. And then the wrestling as well, massively improved. Showed a good system in his takedown defense, dug underhooks, pushed on the head, sprawled well, and then even went round and punished Stipe for it, which I think was very important, to be honest. I think the damage that Stipe took when Ngannou took his back, took him down, started hitting him, I think that really put doubt in Stipe's mind and really discouraged him from pursuing the wrestling later in the fight. So I think that was very important. And getting cracked with a big right hand early and then not being able to have any success with the wrestling really froze Stipe up, and he didn't do much for the rest of the fight, to be honest.
Yeah, I think especially in that second round, I think people talked about him, overexposing himself for the finish, but I think he probably, I think it was a bit over, it was a bit overexposing himself, but I think he probably came to the conclusion as, that I don't know how I'm going to, outpoint this guy at the minute. His wrestling takedown was sufficient enough. He didn't look like he was, rushing in and sort of, running his cardio dry. I couldn't see where Stipe was going to sort of, point shot and outpoint him. And I think he probably came to the same conclusion that he's getting absolutely peppered by these huge shots and he's just got to go in and try his luck. And lo and behold, that did not go all too well.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if Stipe couldn't have done it necessarily. I think that obviously Ngannou was being far more measured, so he wasn't going to gas nearly as quickly as he did in the first Stipe fight. But I still, just something tells me he couldn't keep that up, at least not to the same quality for 5 rounds. Maybe he could keep it up for 3, but I think 4-5, I think he'd still be struggling. He's just huge. And he's so explosive and relies a lot on his speed and power. I think he's going to drain fairly quickly, even if he fights fairly measured. But I think it was, Stipe caught him with a really nice right hand, a nice counter. And then he did the thing that I mentioned in the kind of preview. It's when Stipe does crack someone, he does have a tendency to rush after them, and he really squares up when throwing. And he did that. He caught, he caught Ngannou with the counter right, and then kind of went ahead thinking, "Oh, we've got him." And when he rushes forward trying to punch, he really squares up in his stance. and Ngannou like just punished it immediately in the most brutal fashion. I think Stipe, I saw like a freeze frame, and Stipe was literally in midair as Ngannou caught him. Like his both feet were completely off the ground. And then he fell like back on his leg. That looked terrible. Cannot be good for the knees. So it was much improved by Ngannou. Quite sad to see for Stipe. But Ngannou seems like he's going to be a very worthy champion and going to be a good champion going forward, hopefully. And I hope that he doesn't just kind of like rest on his laurels now that he had a very good performance against Stipe, or it wasn't just that he felt that he needed to fight like that because it was Stipe and that he'll go back to winging meme fighter now. I hope that he continues to make improvements going forward, because that would be really nice to see. And Ngannou seems like a great guy, so I'm happy for him as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though at the same time, I'm sad for Stipe.
Yeah, I think there is still so much more potential in Ngannou. I think we've seen in this fight huge developments, but I think there's still, as you said, levels that he can go up more still. As you said, I'm sure the cardio can probably still get better. There's still elements of his, offense that did get a bit wild. I think he can be wild like that, and at sometimes, as long as it's sort of calculated wildness, because he's got the chin to back him up. And
he has a fantastic chin. There's no doubt.
If he feels like there's an opportunity, I think when he blocked the takedown and sort of didn't take Stipe's back, but sort of got around him, then I think you saw that sort of wild Ngannou come out. But in that scenario, I don't mind him being wild like that, because there was no threat coming back from him. And if he gets the shot through just like furious swinging, then that gets job done. But I think what we saw then is there was explosive, but then there was also the calmness that enabled him to set up his cleaner and more precise shots. Very, very impressed by Ngannou. And it would be interesting to see what's next for him. I think it's probably, Jon Jones is the Jon Jones thing is interesting. I don't know if that will materialize, to be honest. At this point, I don't think it will. It seems like it's interesting because surely he's going to fight at heavyweight, because
I don't know.
He's put on all that weight.
But indications from Jon Jones, like previously, kind of like in his life, show that like he enjoys like the bodybuilding, the weightlifting, powerlifting, whatever. He enjoys that. So if he doesn't get the money that he wants, or the fights that entice him at heavyweight, it's very possible he just doesn't fight again. And he's just putting on the weight just for himself. He could just retire. I don't know if we'll see Jon Jones fight again. I'm kind of 50-50 on it at the moment. But it'll be interesting. I think that fight happens. It will be interesting to see, obviously, how Jon Jones looks at heavyweight. And then kind of like how Ngannou reacts to him, because what we've seen previously from Ngannou is that he can be an opponent that's kind of like psyched out, I suppose. Like pressure can get to him, like in the Stipe and the Derek Lewis fights, he was quite shaken. So just the kind of like idea of, it's Jon Jones in front of me. It'll be interesting to see how Ngannou reacts to that. But I don't really expect Jones to look that good, and would, at a first guess, imagine that Ngannou probably is the first one to get a legit win over him.
Yeah, I think I would favour that too. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. If that one doesn't materialise, you probably say it's Lewis next.
Yeah, Lewis.
That would make the same. They've obviously got the fight before with, so that probably makes the most sense. But if it's not, Jones. I think for Stipe, it'll be interesting. He seems like he's going to come back. Obviously he needs some time out. I don't want that guy. I think actually he said on his Instagram that he's going to be taking time off for the birth of his son, which I think is in the summer, and then looking back at things. So that sounds like a good 3, 4, 5 months off before he even thinks about, training and getting back into fight mode, which is good. I think he definitely needs that. And I think he is a guy that knows his body quite well and is, he's not afraid to take like a long time off, in between the first DC and second DC fight. He didn't fight at all and just sort of took time off. So hopefully he takes time off. I mean, other than I said before this fight, he only really had to beat Ngannou and then maybe the Jon Jones fight. If he wins that, then he can retire. And I still think that's probably the same 2 fights that are left for him, really. I can only really see him coming back for the trilogy against Ngannou or a Jon Jones fight. Whether that's before or after a Francis Ngannou title shot. So we'll see, but I don't really see the need for him to fight anyone else, but we'll see.
I think those would be the fights if he comes back, but to be honest, I'd be happy to see him retire.
He's 30. I think he's 38 now.
I think
no young guy. I know. Yeah, 38. Yeah.
I think that he's accomplished most of what he can. That like his body will essentially allow him to. I don't feel like there's nothing in me that really wishes to see a third Ngannou fight.
To be honest, I think
if he were to come back and look, if he were to come back and like make massive adjustments, and like be able to somehow beat Ngannou, not somehow like it's crazy, but like if he were to then beat Ngannou, that would obviously be insanely impressive to me. I would really solidify him beyond a doubt. I think is the heavyweight greatest of all time, even better than Fedor probably. So it'd be interesting, but I don't see it. So for that reason, I just would probably wish that he retires.
The Jones fight actually probably interests me more than the Ngannou fight because
probably
Jones on there. At least you've got sort of UFC lightweight greatest of all time versus UFC heavyweight greatest of all time. So that's up for debate, but I think that's fairly consensus.
I think you can say that Stipe is definitely the UFC great heavyweight.
Yeah. Obviously,
whether he's the greatest, it's him and Fedor. I think. So out of them two, you have the discussion. I don't know where I fall necessarily, but it's UFC light heavyweight greatest of all time, UFC heavyweight greatest of all time. So
we'll
maybe
see where it goes, but I think first and foremost a long time out, which I think he has recognised. But interesting times. And as we said, great for Ngannou. It's an amazing story. And I think thoroughly deserved it. Yeah. Okay. Co-main time. Vicente Luque, Tyron Woodley. I mean, we said we weren't even sure that Vicente Luque could drag a fun fight out of Tyron Woodley, but we were wrong. He actually
he did.
And to be fair, it wasn't even Luque sort of slowly, sort of like a parent with a child say, "Come on, here's a fun fight." Woodley really took it upon himself early on. And he swung for the bleachers. I mean, didn't end well for him, but at least the thought was there.
No, to be honest, I feel actually quite bad for Woodley in this because I think the way he approached this fight, I think would have worked better against someone like Covington or even Burns. Like Covington and Burns, this would have worked better than it did against Luque, but he just couldn't convince himself to do it in those two fights. Whereas in this one, he's really obviously amped himself up. This isn't going to go like my last 3 fights. I'm really going to change it. And he went out and honestly tried his best, and it was honestly his best performance in years. You could even argue it was better than some of his winning performances. It was better. This performance was more interesting and I'd say better than the Damian Maia or to an extent the Till fight. He went out there, he swung, he jabbed. He also was looking to left hook at some points. It's he threw not just through, but he threw combinations sometimes.
Oh my God!
So that was what Woodley? What are you doing? Unfortunately, that left hook then ended up getting countered by Luque, who is a monstrous counterpuncher and is very good at timing those shots. caught him with that, and then Woodley was just on wobbly legs for the rest of the fight. He landed like his own good, powerful shots. He got those in there, but Luque has a beast of a chin, and just looked stunned at points, but never really in trouble. Not like Woodley was. And then cracked him multiple times on the feet, and then did the kind of like old Luque special into the Darce choke, and finished that very nicely. It was very tight by the end, and yeah, it was lovely. Great win for Luque, and as I said last week, my favourite welterweight. So really happy that he's got that name, and he's got that win.
Yeah, no, it is a really good win for him. Certainly deserved. We've said that all these people are fighting Woodley at the right time. It's a great time to hop on his name. A great win. Certainly, we said last week, that the Wonder Boy fight was perhaps something a bit too soon in terms of getting himself into that sort of top band of the welterweights. But this win against Woodley certainly, he's now. I'm just seeing on Wikipedia. He's now number 6 in the rankings. So, he is right up there, ready to mix it with
Nice.
with some of the guys. I mean, him versus Gilbert Burns at the top of my head sounds like a pretty fun fight. But there's plenty of fights up there for him, and he's a cracking fight. Actually, I don't know whether they do it because I think they're quite good friends. I think they're training partners. So
I think they are. Yeah, I think they are. They're both Henry Hoof guys.
So maybe not that fight, but
it'd be a good fight.
Would be, but Vincenzo Luque will, as this fight is testament to, get a fun fight out of anyone. We'll see what comes up with that. The last one we'll talk about briefly is Sean O'Malley, Thomas Almeida. I mean, we said this was a pretty difficult fight for a guy that struggles with southpaws and is on a 3-fight skid. From Almeida's point of view, that was, and it proved that way, really. I mean, a good performance from O'Malley. I mean, a few moments of madness where he just didn't finish the fight when he could have done, and some bizarre sort of like head shakes. I'm not quite sure what he was sort of doing with them.
No, I know what he was doing, but so he likes to spin a lot. He does a lot of spinning back kicks, hook kicks, stuff like that. He's feinting like the spin, but I don't know. It just doesn't look. It's not a good feint. It's not like, I don't think it's a well drilled or rehearsed. Well, I mean, it's very well drilled. I don't think it's a convincing feint. It just I think you can tell the actual spins from the spin feints too easily with O'Malley. They're just not particularly convincing. And it does just look weird. And it also involves it's such a big movement, that feints are meant to be small movements that you don't put yourself in any risk when you do them, and you can keep your eyes fixed on your opponent, and you're ready to then counter your opponent's counters with them. But that feint is such a big movement that he takes his eyes off his opponent, so he can't see what his opponent's going to do anyway, and it can put him at risk due to that. So I don't know. I don't particularly like that feint, and it does just make him look a bit weird and twitchy whilst he's fighting.
Yeah, it was weird, but I mean, bar those sort of minor critiques, a very solid performance from him. The sort of stuff that we're seeing him, fast, variety from both stances. Still, looked like he was having some trouble with the low kick, but I think he's always going to have trouble with that because just of his size and his stance, and still seemed to be rolling over on his ankle just a bit, a couple of times. I probably just due to his the nature of how he fights and how he sort of moves around, but it was very very noticeable that he still was tending to sort of slightly roll over on his ankle, which is a worrying thing still, but a good performance. And I mean, another sort of highlight reel knockout. I was pretty aggrieved that he managed to find his way. I mean, a good performance, but I thought a Jamie Malarkey 46-second KO could have nabbed the performance of the night. But that's minor things.
Yeah, I thought O'Malley looked good. I think I saw someone saying it rang true for me was like O'Malley reacts to leg kicks how I would react to leg kicks. And it's like there was one time I think in the second round, Almeida kicked him and like O'Malley backed all the way off. Like he was pressuring Almeida. Almeida's back was on the cage. Almeida landed an inside leg kick and O'Malley backed all the way off so his back was on the cage. And it's like, that's what I would do. I'd be like, oh, don't like that. I'm going away. So yeah, like he really, I don't know. His kick defense did look better. He was pulling his lead leg back a lot, and O'Malley was kind of with it. Not Almeida was kind of whiffing a lot on those kicks. So that was an improvement. But Almeida, I think, looked like he had things for O'Malley in spurts. Like he was able to kind of like jab and hit straights to the body occasionally, and he was also able to weave in the pocket and land counter left hooks and counter right hands, and then also the leg kicks as well. Like he looked like he had things for O'Malley in spurts, but he could never kind of systematize it and put it together to like form a concrete kind of game plan around it. It was all just like he'd land that and then he'd get beat up for a minute and then he'd land one good thing and then get beat up. So yeah, I think that, and also he was able to pressure O'Malley at points, but O'Malley has decent ring craft. He did fairly nice feints, like feinting direction changes against the fence and was able to escape. But I also think that Almeida wasn't great or wasn't very smart in the attacks that he chose whilst he was pressuring O'Malley. It kind of allowed and opened the door for O'Malley to kind of like slip out the side. So I think a better pressure fighter, someone like Jan at the top of the division, could be fairly rough for O'Malley. But yeah, still a very impressive performance. And just more cage time for O'Malley that he can like kind of get comfortable in there and not like, I don't know, fall apart completely physically.
Yeah. No, a good solid win to get himself back on. I mean, not a top contender, and he's still, going to need to break into that rank. I wonder, no, he's still not ranked, but there's plenty of time for it. As you say, he's only, how old is he? He's only 26, so plenty of time, but a good solid win to sort of, and especially, almost 15 minutes back after the Chito Vera setback. But that was basically it on this card. We talked about a few of the other bits elsewhere, but unless you've got anything else you want to bring up?
No, I think we've mentioned all the news that I can think of, or all the important news. Paddy Pimblett got signed by the UFC.
Yes, that is true.
That's the thing. Yeah, he looked good in his last fight in Cage Warriors. So yeah, that'll be interesting. I'll see where he slots them. He's going to featherweight. Although I think he's fought at both featherweight and lightweight.
Yeah, I listened. You probably listened to the same BT interview where he said he was going to try and get down to featherweight.
Yeah, I think he said he mentioned something what Conor McGregor did, and he wants to kind of emulate that to a certain extent. So yeah, I think he says that he's going to be signing and trying to get down to featherweight. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see where he slots in.
Yeah, definitely another good name to look forward to. But yeah, hopefully we'll be talking about him in the near future. Well, next week we've got hopefully, Victoria versus Holland, which we've discussed a bit, but Arnold Allen, Sadiq Youssef, which is a good one, and the rest of that card where there's a bit of intrigue, but not a whole lot. But we'll maybe be back in the week to do a quick rundown and give some thoughts on those fights. But until then, stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you then.
See ya.